wow, that's the wrong camera, isn't it? It sure is. Let's do this one. Hey, friends. Happy not Friday night. Can you hear me okay? I'm hoping you can. I have to move the microphone around. So this is an impromptu live. I think I'm going to be live for about an hour or so. And I just thought, why not? I just got home from dinner with the family. We did dinner and ice cream. So I have spent time out and about. I worked in the office today, so this is actually the first time all day I've been able to be in my sewing room. And I thought I wanted some company while I sit in here and figure out how the heck I'm going to tackle this. So here I am on a live stream, unannounced. Probably be here until about 8:30 Eastern time. It's 7:30 now. And I figured I'd just chat and catch up with you guys, especially since I really haven't done much content in the month of July because I was off for like 2 weeks, and show you what is going on in my world. Maybe this is a problem that you have had too. So let me tell you about the title of this video. So my daughter asked for a quilt. My daughter asked for a quilt. She doesn't ask for quilts very often. She doesn't ask for projects very often. But this time she has, and so I want to turn it out as quickly as I possibly can because I just love the idea that she asked me to make something for her. She has a couple of quilts on her bed. None of them were requests. They were just quilts that I made and asked her if she liked them. And even if she said no, I still gave them to her. So she's got a couple of quilts that she's using. But this one is one that she's helped pick out the fabric for. She's helped pick out the color for. And she wants me to make for her. So I'm going to show you what my fabric pull is in just a moment. But before we do, I just want to say hello to a few people in the chat. I see Katie from Greenland Quilters here. Hello, Katie. We've got Jenny Harris. She says it looks like Tula. It is Tula. She picked this out, so I'll show that to you in just a moment. Kitty says, glad to see you. You're keeping me from spending money at So Yeah. Well, I won't be here the entire time that they are, so there's still plenty of time to shop with So Yeah after the live stream here is done. Laura G says, hello, everyone. Hello. Beverly says, are you mixing up my days? No, I'm just doing an impromptu live stream. So, family doesn't even know that I'm doing this. So if they walk in, they walk in. Just saying. Paula Hoopinger says, hello, everyone. Great Granny says, hi, Becca. I hope you're doing well. I am new to this site and I am enjoying it. Well, welcome. Karen Fairbairn says, hello from Scotland. Zaza is here as well. Rose Davis says, good evening from Columbus, Ohio. All right. So my daughter loves elephants. Absolutely loves them. And she has been asking to change up her room a little bit. And she hasn't really given any clarification for what that means. And when you kind of press her into, are you looking to change the furniture? Are you looking to change the pictures on the wall? Like, what does that mean? All she talks about is she wants different blankets on her bed. Hence quilts, right? And so I said, well, I could make you a quilt. Would you like me to make you one? And she said, sure. And we started talking about the idea of making one with elephant fabric. So I grabbed a few different pieces of elephant fabric and showed them to her. And what she ended up choosing is the elephant fabric from the Everglow line by Tula Pink. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do with the elephant fabric? And I'll show you what I'm going to do here. In fact, I'm going to give you all of the dimensions for everything that I did to make the block, and I'm going to make 80 of them because I want it to be 8 by 10. There is no pattern that's going to go with this, but I will walk you through how I make one of the blocks in this video. So if you want to replicate this, you can. And after the live is over, I'll go down into the description box and I'll try to type out the cutting instructions per block. And then you can just take this video and turn it into however big you want that to be. Let your creativity direct you where you're going to go with this. Is this something that you want to be a table runner and you need 10 blocks for? Then just multiply, right? So this could be done with scraps. It could be done with a lot of yardage, whatever works for you, but I'm going to show you all of that. Let's go really quick to the overhead camera, and I'm going to show you the fabric that I pulled. So the first piece of fabric was this elephant, and I'm going to tell you, I knew I was probably going to need a lot because I wanted to just cut the elephants out, but I wasn't sure how I was going to cut it out. So I went and bought, would you believe, 4 yards of this elephant fabric. And I thought I got enough. In fact, I was pretty sure that I probably bought more than I needed. Well, these are all scraps, and they're probably going to go in a scrap bag. I can't use them, and here's why. Because when I started cutting out the elephants, I realized after I picked out the pattern that I'm going to make, I need to cut them on point, and I want each one to be 6.5 inches on point. And so in order to get that, there are elephants in the yardage that I can't use because I don't have enough distance or between seam allowance and the entire elephant, or whatever the case may be. So this is unusable for this quilt. However, some of these extra pieces would be great for like some EPP or some other fun things. So I'm just going to set the scrap pile aside. So I got the elephant. There were 2 colorways of the elephant. There was the blue and the pink. And I thought maybe she would want, or it was like more of a purple, I guess, not a pink. But she specifically wanted the blue. So I only got the blue elephant. And then I needed to figure out what I wanted to go with that. And this is always the hard thing, especially if you don't have a pattern in mind. I knew I wanted to pull the blue out because she really liked that blue. And so I got the blue polka dot to go with it and the blue stripe. And I thought I could start working that together. But I wasn't sure if that was all I was going to need. And so I also got a gray solid. I'll just kind of set this over here. And the reason why I pulled the gray is because the gray kind of picks up the gray on the elephant body. Again, I wasn't sure what my pattern was going to be or how much I was going to need. And so I was just trying to get some fabric and figure it out. And if I needed to buy more later, I could. So for these 3 fabrics, I bought 2 yards of each. I figured with the solid, I can always use a solid for something else. And these 2 are really good blenders, and they're pretty blue. So if I end up not using all of the 2 yards, and that's great. And then I was like, well, you know, maybe I want to pull out some of the colors that are inside of this elephant block. I really like that purple. And so I pulled a purple with a little dot on it to kind of pull out that purple. I like the green that's in the leaf. And so I pulled out a bright green that kind of matches that leaf. And then I kind of liked the lavender look here in the petals, and so I felt like I could pull that too. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these tiny dots. I did get a yard of each, and I still don't know what I'm going to do with it. We'll figure it out. Maybe something fun for a border, whatever, but I do have them, and I feel like it plays on the colors inside of the elephant fabric. So as I was playing with the fabric and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I came across a pattern by Sweet Tea Patterns. And I will tell you the name of it. And again, after the video is over, after the live stream is over, I will put this information in the description box down below, and I'll even put a link to the pattern in case you want to see it. Let me show you what that pattern looked like. I did download it, didn't I? I think I did. Let me just double check. Is this it? I have to double check if this is the right PDF. It doesn't look like the right name, but the date is right. And of course, Adobe is taking a minute to open because technology, right? Oh my goodness. I guess I could always look at, oh, yep, this is it. Okay, so I am going to share my screen with you really quick and show you the pattern that this was inspired by. All right. Acrobat Reader. This is it. And so I'm trying to not give all of the pattern. I've got my whole computer's frozen. This is the fabric requirements for the four different quilt sizes that are in there. Literally, Acrobat Reader is just frozen on my screen. Come on now. You can't make this up. You can't make this up. Let's quit and see what happens. Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. We're going to go into Google Chrome and I can show you the picture of the pattern over in my purchased history. Here it is. This is it. Come on. There we go. All right. Got to come back over to this other screen. Is it working now? Oh, it is working. I don't know. No, it's still not working. Okay, we're just going to go over to Google Chrome. Just give me a moment. Here we are. So this is the pattern that I saw online. I saw this and I was like, oh, that's a lot of fun. I think this is the one that I want to do. And again, this is by Sweet Tea Patterns. And I'll put a link in the live chat and then I will try to remember to copy that and put it in for the description box down below. So here is the pattern. Anyway, this is what I saw and I was like, oh, that's a lot of fun. I like that. And I started studying it and I was like, okay, I paid for the pattern, totally paid for the pattern. It was $12 and I got it and I started looking at the instructions. I was like, I don't think I want to do it that way. And I like where they were going, but I don't know if that's what I want to do. So enter what I like to say, the starting off point. I feel like patterns are always a launching off point. They don't always have to be exactly what the pattern writer told you to do. You are totally entitled to do what you would like to do on the pattern or on your quilt. It's your quilt, your thing, you do it your way. I am literally just filling dead air right now because I'm trying to find my window where the chat is because I can't see you. There we are. Okay, there we go. Now we got the chat. All right, so that's the pattern. And as I was sitting there looking through the instructions from Sweet Tea Patterns, I was like, nope, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to do something else. And so this is what I originally came up with. I was going to cut all of the elephants on point, and I thought I could square them off, so almost like a square and a square, and that led me to making, oh, I don't have just one of them. I took the stripe fabric and set it on point, and then I took the dot fabric and set it on point, and I didn't quite love the way it looked. I like the striped fabric more than the dot fabric. The dot fabric seemed to kind of lose the elephant, but the stripe fabric allowed the elephant to pop off of the quilt. And so I liked that, but the stripe was really busy and I wanted to calm it down. So I started thinking about, okay, well, how can I build this out? What's my secondary design going to be? What is this going to look like when I put it all together? And so what I did is I decided, what if those sample blocks that I made, I just snowballed the four corners of the economy block. Let me show you what I came up with. I started off with this and then I set it, I squared it off. Two of them, like I said, I squared off with a dot like this. Get that out of the way. And then two of them I squared off with the stripe, but then I snowballed with the opposite fabric. And so what that's allowed me to do is set out these four blocks and see if I like this pattern. It kind of gives me this secondary pattern right in the middle here where all four blocks come together. I will have to be really careful about matching up the points when I put this all together, but I think it's actually really cute. It started off with the square that was on point, and then I just took setting triangles to square off the block, and then squares to snowball the four corners. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. I have got a number of these already cut. I'm going to start going through and just doing some of them. I'll do one block tutorial, but that's what I'm working on, guys. So let me know in the description box what you think of the idea. And again, this is not following a pattern by any means. It's not following a pattern at all. But it is one of those things where I bought a pattern that I thought I wanted to make. And who knows, maybe in the future I will want to make that pattern. But the purchase of that pattern inspired another design. So sometimes your quilt isn't going to be what the pattern calls for. And that is completely okay. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I start off with a 6.5-inch square that is on point. And then in my pile of fabrics, I cut from the setting fabric, what's going to go around that square. I cut 2 5.5-inch squares, and then I cut that on the diagonal. So Blessed by Jess says, I love the secondary pattern. Karen Bray says, OMG, I love this, Becca. Florence Goff says, that is amazing. Zaza says, I love that. Noreen says, I love your creativity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Pastry Creams Farmhouse Adventure says, hello everyone in the chat. Hope everyone is having a great day. Becca, I love how Ruby turned out. My Duchess has made its first trip. Love that pattern. Catherine Andrews says, I love that. The colors you chose are amazing together. Danelle says, hello, so Becca and everyone else. Now, when I'm cutting this fabric, this is not pre-starched. It's just straight off of the bolt. And I want to starch it before I cut it down. So I cut a length and then I starch that length and will subcut from the bit that I'm cutting. From the snowball, or the fabric that I'm going to use to snowball those 4 corners after I set my on point block square again, I need 2.5-inch squares. I need 4 of them for each block. So I'm going to cut off a 2.5-inch, a little bit more than that, strip of fabric from my yardage. I'm going to starch both of these and I'm going to subcut down and make my block. First, I need starch. The bottle's getting a little low. Zaza says the blue elephants are much nicer than the pink or purple version. Somebody said, oh, you were talking about how you love Ruby. I love her too. My sister tuned into the live on Friday night and was listening while she was spending some time doing some coloring. She loves to do coloring and painting and things like that. So while she was doing that, she tuned in and was listening, one of my 2 sisters. And I was talking to her last night and she said, I really enjoyed your live stream. It was really nice just to hear you talking. And then when you weren't talking, the sound of Ruby was so nice. I was like, yeah, it's great. I am enjoying my time sewing on my Singer. So for those of you that don't know this red machine here, this is a 1951 Singer 301 that has been custom painted red for me. And I call her Ruby. And I have decided, at least for now, you never know what's going to happen in the future, but at least for now, Ruby will be my primary machine. The Juki is going to move over to my side table and it will sit there so that I have access to it when I want to sew something that the Juki is really better for. But there's something about the sound of this machine that is just absolutely super satisfying, both for videos, for me, like just being in the room, it's soothing to hear. So I think I am making the switch to, I won't say all the time sewing on the Singer, but predominantly sewing on the Singer. Marty Lawless says, that fabric is so cute. How old is your daughter? She will be 14 this year. Dale says, it makes it look like a circus motif. I love it. Yes, it does. So I was thinking I was going to call the quilt Elephants on Parade. And then when I saw those 4 blocks come together with the stripes and the dots, I was like, oh, this is giving me big tent vibes. Jan says, back after being gone for a while. Stunning design idea. Thank you, Jan, and welcome back. Beverly says, where is the purple going? I like it. I don't know. I don't know. That's part of the struggle. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those tiny dot prints. Maybe something in the border, but I can't quite I'm not quite sure what I want to do in the border. I know that these blocks are going to finish at 8.5 inches. So, oh, it just turned off my monitor. I hate it when it does that. They're going to finish at 8.5 inches. So they're going to square at 9 inches when it's all put together. And so I want to make the quilt plenty big enough that it's going to cover her double bed. So I'm thinking 8 across and 10 down. You can do the math on that yourself. But I'm trying to figure out if I want to add a border. I'm pretty sure I do. And then what would that border be? I don't think I want to do just a border of fabric. I think I want to do a pieced border. And so I'm trying to figure out in my head with that tiny dot fabric, what would I do? And if I'm doing this, I mean, if it's for my daughter, then we can absolutely like put some extra energy and effort into it. And so I'm kind of thinking, wouldn't it be kind of cool to do like maybe a staggered flying geese type of thing, or maybe some pinwheels, like offset, just scattered, and use those fabrics for it, maybe floating on that gray. So we've got some floating pinwheels around the elephants. That would be neat. What are your thoughts? What do you think I should do for the border? Janet says, I have my mother's 1964 Singer. I took lessons with her on it at the Singer store. My first bedroom suite was made by the Singer Corporation circa 1975. Nice. Elephants under a big top. That's what it's given, right? That's what it's reading as. Becca, the Bargello is absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Yes, this is what I started on Friday night. I finished it. I have just one done. I do have enough fabric that I could make another one. It's about 20 inches by 20 inches. And so my plan is to quilt it up and turn it into a pillow cover and make another one that maybe looks like a mirror image of that. So I've got one going up and down and the other one will go up and down that way. And then I can have a set of matching quilted pillow covers. So thanks. Kay said, I was totally getting ready to say pinwheels with the green and the purple. Math Geek says circus pinwheels. Jess says pinwheels. The crafty author says, I love the pinwheel idea. That would really tie it all together. Zaza says, I love staggered flying geese. I do too. And that wouldn't be bad either. But I've kind of got that in mind for my continuum quilt. I've kind of started that, but I haven't finished it. So I don't know if I necessarily want it there, but I think the pinwheels, like that just kind of popped into my head on the live, and I'm seeing several people in the chat saying the pinwheels would be great. So I like that. Laura says checkerboard border with white and some of the fabric you have there. Dawn Stewart says, I always finish the main part of the quilt before auditioning border ideas. It works better that way for me to visualize. Me too. Sometimes that's what I've got to do too. That's why I've just been like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with the borders. Right now, I'm thinking it will probably be some form of pinwheels, but even in that, I want to get the quilt together and see what it looks like first. And also, I would like Zoey to help me decide what I do with the quilt, because I don't want to do something from a design element that she is just absolutely against. This is a quilt that I hope she'll use for many years to come, and I want her to be happy with how it looks. And I know one of the things that she's really been talking about is she doesn't want anything that looks baby. So she wants a big girl room. All right, I need 4 of the squares that are going to snowball the corners, measured at 2.5 inches squared. So I'm just going to cut off 4 of those now so I have them. So just repeating the cutting instructions for this, you need a 6.5 inch square set on point. So might take some fussy cutting out of your yardage if you want to get something. It should be 6.5 inches, but if your fabric is directional, you'll want to set that on point, right? 6.5 inch square. You'll need for the snowball corners 4 2.5 inch square pieces. And then for the setting triangles, you need 2 5.5 inch squares. And then we're going to cut through on the diagonal to get us our triangles. 5.5 inches. Okay. All right. I now have all of my elements cut and ready to go to make my first block. So let's get sewing. But first, but wait, there's more. I just want to get my ironing mat up here so that I can press as I go. So Blessed by Jess says, I have a 10th grader and we were just discussing a new quilt for her. We are Pinterest looking. I made a board just for her. It's time for a bedroom refresh. That's where we're at too. All right, so let me go to the overhead 3 camera setup so that you guys can kind of see everything. This always works best for when I'm trying to explain how I'm doing something. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take my square and I'm going to turn it 45 degrees so that it's on point. And then for my setting triangles, I'm going to do opposite sides each time first. So one here and one here. And then after those are sewn on and pressed, I will do the other 2 sides. Now, it is important for me that I take the time to find center on the square and center on the triangles. So I'm going to pick up the square and I'm just going to fold it in half one way. And I'm going to crease that side with my finger. I'm going to crease this other side with my finger, and that's going to give me a little valley, a little dent directly in the middle of the fabric on each of these sides. Then I'm going to take the setting triangles, and now you'll notice when I laid these out, I did so that it makes a square. The long edge of our triangle, this is the bias edge where it's stretchy, is going to go against the square. So I want to fold the corners together along that long edge and just give that a little finger press and just be gentle when you do that because this is bias and it's going to be a little stretchy. Then I'm just going to lay these right side together and I'm going to match up that little dent. I want the creases that I made to lay on top of one another. And then I'll come over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch that down with 1/4 inch. You can pin this or clip it if you want to hold that in place. I am okay keeping control of a small bit of fabric like this. If it was anything bigger, I might pin it. I will tell you the first couple of blocks that I did pin just to make sure that everything was good. I'll snip that off. We'll bring this back over here to our cutting mat or our pressing mat, and I'm just going to push this up and over very gently. I want the seam to go underneath this setting triangle. You could have it go under the center square if you wanted to, that's fine too. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to match up the middle first where those finger creases are. Line up the raw edge of my fabric, come over and stitch with 1/4 inch. And then we'll come back over to our pressing mat and we'll push this out to this side. And I'm going to press that with a hot dry iron, not worrying about starch or steam or anything at this point. Just pressing that out and over. And now I've got these overhangs. I'm not really worried about that. We're still going to keep building this out the same way that we did before. So these 2 sides we have added on, but now we want to put the triangles on these sides. So I'm going to pick this up and fold it in half. And when I do it this time, I'm going to take these edges of the fabric, and you can kind of see here, I'm making sure that the seams are laying right on top of each other because I want the absolute direct middle right here. I'll finger crease that there. I'll do the same thing to the other side. Give that a good finger crease. And then we're going to lay it here. I'm going to finger crease on my setting triangles there. Dot says, FYI, it's National Cheesecake Day. Crazy enough, we went for ice cream after dinner and my husband got cheesecake ice cream. So there you go. All right. Now we'll come over here and stitch this down with 1/4 inch. And by the way, the size that I gave you, the 5.5 inch size for the setting triangles, you're going to see in just a moment that that was plenty big enough for you to square this down. So if you are a beginner and your 1/4 inch isn't actually perfect, it's not absolutely spot on, you're going to be okay. So don't stress over that. I would say this is a block that anybody can do. With these measurements, you should be just fine. Hello, Billy. And then we'll stitch this down. Don't forget, for those of you that are planning to go to QuiltCon in Phoenix in February, if you are a Modern Quilt Guild member, registration for the event and classes opens tomorrow, and those things sell out quickly. So if you are planning to go to QuiltCon and you want to take some classes, make sure to do that. Make sure to get on the website first thing tomorrow morning and snag the classes that you're looking for. Okay, once those are put on, then I'll grab my iron. I'll give the whole block a nice press. I want to get this as flat as possible before I square it up. Now, I'm going to square this down. I think it's like 9 inches, but I don't just put a 9-inch ruler on this and clean it up. Instead, what I do is I measure from the center points here to keep the block straight, and then I'm making sure that I'm 1/4 inch over. And I know from my previous blocks that this center of the block should be 4.5 in order to clean it up and get it to squared 9 inches. So I'm going to find the 4.5 inch mark on my ruler, which is right here. I'm going to have that 4.5 inch line go right through this point up here and right through this point down here. And when that happens, I should see that this point over here is 1/4 inch in on my ruler. If I want to slide my ruler down just a little bit, I can see that more because there was a number there. So there's the 1/4 inch mark. It's laying directly on top of that point. I'm going to take my rotary cutter, slice through that, and then I will turn this block 90 degrees, and this time I'm going to put that 4.5 inch mark right through the point at the top and the point at the bottom, but also I am looking for the 1/4 inch mark here on the point on the side, and I am making sure that that cut edge right here is on a nice line on my ruler so that this is going straight. And then I'll clean this up. And I should now have a perfect 90 degrees. If I wanted to put this under a square ruler, I could do it this way. This would go at the 9-inch mark. This would go at the 9-inch mark, and I would just clean that up. I don't have that here, so I'm just going to keep doing what I did before. 4.5 inches right through both points. That's my first reference point. My second reference point is the 1/4 inch mark over here, and the third is this line down at the bottom. Do that until you've cleaned up all 4 sides. And there's our base block. So this is what I had started making, and you can kind of see like it's lacking something. And so that's where the snowball blocks kind of came in for me. Now these are directional. And by the way, this was also an issue for the setting triangles. I had to cut one set going in one direction and another set going in another direction to make sure that all my lines were going the same way. If that was important to me, it might not be important to you. So for the setting triangles, where's my marking pen? I had a marking utensil. I guess I'll use this one. For the setting triangles, what I'll do, where's my small ruler? I can't find anything today. I had a small ruler. Well, oh, there it is. I found you. You can't hide forever. I'm going to take my small ruler and before I do anything else, I want to make sure that because this is directional, when I flip it over, the fabric is going to go in the direction I want it to. So I'm going to lay this on here and I'm just going to fold this back. And if the stripes are going the way I want them to, then I know that's how I'm going to draw this. If I had put it on this way, the stripes would be going side to side. I know I want all of my stripes to go up and down. So I laid it on here, I'm pulling it back, I can see the stripes are going up and down, so I know that I'm going to draw my line on the wrong side of this piece of fabric this way. It's hard to see the blue on the blue, at least on camera, but I can see it in person. I'm using a water-soluble pen from Zoey. This is a marking that is meant for fabric and the ink disappears when it comes into contact with moisture. Once I have that line drawn on there, I will line up my fabric right sides together, make sure that the raw edges are nice and tidy and lined up. Then I'll take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch just right next to that line that I drew. Like literally, it's almost laying on top of the line, but it's more to the right than dead center. And then, I love this trick, before I cut off the excess, I want to make sure that my stitch and flip is good. So I'm going to put my finger in between the two layers of fabric and push this over. And what I'm looking for at this point is that the fabric that I pushed over is completing this corner perfectly. If it's too small, that means that my stitching was to the left of that line too far. So I need to rip that seam out and sew it again. If it's too big, which you would be able to tell from the back side, then that means that your seam was too small. It was too far to the right of the line. Now, the good news for that is you don't have to rip out that stitch. You can just take it back to your sewing machine and stitch closer to the blue line. So this is a good way to make sure that your stitch and flips are absolutely on point. See what I did there? Before you do your cleaning up. So I'm going to trim this one down. Looks good to me. And I'm going to repeat this for the other three corners. And that's it. That's the block. Easy peasy, right? And it's so interesting to me how you can make the same block either with the same set of fabrics or maybe just changed up fabrics. But then when you start to put it into a quilt, how it can make all those secondary patterns and things. And you're not going to see this finished quilt tonight. So just letting you know, I already know that I need to make 80 of these. I only have 4 made. After I get this one done, it will be 75. And for those of you that are probably doing the math in your head, you're probably asking yourself, was 4 yards of that elephant fabric enough? No, it wasn't. I did go through and fussy cut out all of my elephants, but the first few batches of elephants that I was fussy cutting, because I was working from a 4-yard cut, I felt overwhelmed with the bulk of all of that fabric. So I was cutting off like a small bit of the yardage, about half a yard to 2/3 of a yard. And then I would try to fussy cut and do all the things. And I was losing elephants every time I cut off a length of that fabric, a chunk of that yardage. So I eventually got smart when I had about 1.5 yards, I think, left, and just decided to starch the whole bit of fabric and take it over to a tabletop that I could stand at, open the entire thing up, take my ruler up to the fabric and start drawing out where the fussy cut would be, and then rotary cut everything. Once I did that, I got more out of my yardage and I had less in the scrap pile, but I still am lacking. So I was only able to cut, I think 56, I think it was. I was able to cut, I think like 56 elephants. I need 80. So I had to go order more fabric. So I ordered another 4 yards of this elephant stuff. Fortunately, I could find it on Etsy. I swear by the time this quilt is done, I will have spent probably $300 or $400 just in the fabric alone. probably closer to 4. And then just like I did before, I'm just going to test those flips. This one looks, do you see how this one is going a little beyond? It's kind of hard to see that low, but this one looks like it's a little too big. And that means, as we said, I was too far to the right of the line. So I'm going to come in here and stitch closer to that blue line. Louise says, is that Tula fabric you're working with? Yes, it is. See, now that's perfect. And then we'll test this one. That looks good. So now I will cut off the excess on those other 3 corners. What happens if you aren't able to get the print? Could you stretch it by including the patch coordinating blocks? I could. If I wasn't able to get the print, which I have been able to, so I'm good, I could always just maybe take the same setting triangle, but maybe make a 9 patch out of those small dots and set that on point. That would look really cute. So if you were trying to set, if you were wanted to do that, let me think of the math for you while I'm cutting. So the way I do math for quilting, hold on, I do better showing than I do explaining. When you're seeing somebody work some math out in their head, it's easier to see what the heck they're talking about on paper, right? So let me get a marker and a piece of paper. So if you wanted to take a 9 patch and put this in the center of this, let's talk about that. The 9 patch is going to look like this. It's going to have 3 rows of 3. Now we know that the center square in this block has to be 6.5 inches. So I know I need it to be 6.5 inches this way and 6.5 inches this way. And that's my squared up number. My finished size is 6 inches. Seam allowances throw everybody off with math. What I like to do to figure out how big to cut my squares for a 9 patch is take the finished size of my 9 patch, which in this case is 6, and divide it by 3 because I have 1, 2, 3 units, right? And so once I do that, then I get 2 inches finished. Well, for cutting, we always have to add a 1/2 inch to that finished size when we're doing our cutting. So our cutting should be 2.5 inch squares. So for this block to make a 9 patch, you would need 9 pieces of 2.5 inches by 2.5 inch fabric. And when you sew those together, this 2.5 inch will turn into 2 inches up and down and 2 inches left and right. Does that make sense? I know I went through that really quickly, but that would be a really cute design element to get back to what happens if you can't get any more of the elephant fabric. Well, if I couldn't, and I did, so I think I'll be okay, but this might even still be kind of a cute idea. Take these 3 fabrics to make some 9 patches. Just take some 2.5 inch squares, make the 9 patches, put this in here, and then you'll have those squares set on point with the same dot and stripe kind of framing it out. Does that make sense? Hello, Janine. Shelby says, yes, show your work. Where's my press mat. Just learned how to import fabrics into EQ8 from a YouTube video. It's so easy. Now I'm playing around with it. Oh, absolutely. I'll import fabric swatches into EQ8 and Pre-Quilt. I use both applications when I'm designing quilts to get a visual layout for how something works. Cindy says, have you used the folded corner clipper tool to pre-trim corners? I hate drawing the lines. I have not, but I have heard a lot of people swear by it. I'll be honest, most of the time I don't draw lines because I use the diagonal seam tape. I don't have that on Ruby just yet because I am waiting, excuse me, I am waiting for her surround to come in. So sometime in the next week or so, she's going to be lowered down into this cabinet and sit in the place where the Juki used to sit. And at that point, I have diagonal seam tape right here on the table. You can't see it, but I run that onto my little surround, and I use that most of the time when I'm doing stitch and flip or half square triangle units. And I'll show you, I don't have the roll, but I can take a little bit of the tape. This diagonal seam tape is great. It's got 3 lines on it, a red line in the middle, and then 2 black lines on either side. And those 2 black lines are exactly a 1/4 inch away from that red line. And so what I'll do when I'm installing it is I'll pull off a really big length and I'll lay it on top of the feed dogs underneath the needle and make sure by hand cranking the needle up and down that the needle goes into the middle of that red line. And then I'll just pull it all the way down and put it on the table. And as long as it goes straight and there's no twist or bubbles or anything in it, I can be assured that this black line is always a 1/4 inch. And so if I were to stitch this on the machine, then I would be putting the point right there on the red because that's where the needle's going to hit. But if I wanted to stitch a 1/4 inch away, then I would put the point at the black line. So the points are always going to be either on the black lines if you're stitching a 1/4 inch away from the line, or on the red line if you're doing a stitch and flip. I hope that made sense. So that's the tool that I tend to use. I think it's one of those things where I just learned that method and this worked for me. And so while that other tool that you had mentioned is not a bad idea and other people out there might find it to be a lifesaver and absolutely wonderful for them, you get used to the tools and the tricks and the habits, whether they're good or bad, once you've been doing it for a little while. So I did get one. It was in a Sew Sampler box. I never used it. Janine says, I made the cinnamon raisin bread today. Awesome. Did you like it? Louis says, I love using that tape. Cindy says, thank you. I've never understood the seam tape. That was a great visual. I could do a video. You know, I really need to keep a list of the questions that people ask and do videos just on those questions. Somebody had asked, why is it not a good idea to starch your fabric before you cut? Or why is it not a good idea to starch your fabric after you cut? And so I did a whole video just on that topic and did the demonstration and showed you how fabric shrinks with steam, flatter, and best press, but doesn't shrink with just a hot, dry iron. So I want to do more videos like that. So if you guys have questions or demos that you would like me to explore in a video, feel free to email them to me at becca@sewbecca.com. Oop, I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Apparently not. Apparently not. All right, so reminder, what am I doing? Let me show those that are coming in and haven't been here. Let me show you what my goal is. I am taking some Tula Pink fabric and making a quilt that I am calling Elephants on Parade for my daughter. I'm going to give you the overhead view so you can see what these blocks look like when they all come together. I'm making 40 blocks that have this piece set on point and are framed out with dots and then snowballed with the stripes. And then I'm making 40 blocks that are elephants set on, framed by the stripe and then snowballed with the dot, and the goal is that I will alternate them in a layout so that you have stripe, dot, and then dot, stripe, so that we start to get this really fun secondary pattern right in the middle. We'll have to take very careful attention to match up our points here, here, and here, but it's for my daughter and it'll be worth it. So I am making 80 blocks, 40 of this one, 40 of this one. Each of these blocks will square up at 9 inches. And if you go back and watch the video, I showed you cutting instructions for all of this. And I showed you how I made one of the blocks. And the goal is that you can use this video to make whatever quilt project you want to make. Make 4 blocks into a wall hanging, make 9 into a table topper or a table runner, make a baby quilt with 12 of them. Just figure out how wide-ish you want it to be. Keep in mind that the blocks will finish at 8.5 inches, and do a little bit of the math. So if you're looking for something that's around 50 inches, I would take 50, divide it by 8.5, and see about how many blocks you need to get for the width. Hope that helps. Shelby says, look at how straight those stripes are sewn. Nice. Don't look too closely. Don't look too closely. Louise says, my mother-in-law gave me a great bread recipe with honey and walnuts or pecans. It's yummy. Louise, you can email that to me at becca@sewbecca.com. I am all about some bread recipes, especially right now. So when we went to the retreat in Pennsylvania, Janine, who is in the chat, she brought her bread maker and was making fresh bread every day for everybody there. And it kind of started this whole thing where everybody wanted to make bread. So I came home and bought a cheap bread maker, and I've been juggling between 2 recipes, but I've got a couple more that I want to try. The cinnamon raisin bread that she's talking about, I actually gave to her because she gave me a honey bread recipe. So we swapped recipes. It was great. The cinnamon raisin bread recipe, for those of you out there that want to try to make this in your own bread maker, or maybe just make it in your own oven if you're going to need the bread and everything on your own, I will tell you is from Bread Dad. If you go onto Google, and I'll try to link the recipe in the description box down below, it's going to be, I'm going to try to have to remember all of these things. But if you go to Bread Dad, there's a recipe for cinnamon raisin bread, and it's delicious. But I did make a couple modifications to that recipe just for our own taste preferences. Just remember, anytime you're cooking, anytime you're baking, anytime you're sewing, anytime you're quilting, anytime you're doing anything, you don't have to follow the instructions to a T. You are completely able and welcomed and encouraged to veer off a little bit to try something that you think might make it better. Sometimes it'll be a failure and sometimes it won't be. You'll either nail it or fail it, but you won't know until you try. For that bread recipe, I did step up the amount of cinnamon in there. I think the original recipe called for the 2-pound loaf, called for 1.5 teaspoons. I went up to 2. And then for the brown sugar, the original recipe called for 1/3 cup of packed light brown sugar. I went up to 1/2 cup, and I found that that was the right balance for our family. Lisa's Quilting Corner says, are you going to use the dot fabric for the borders? I actually don't know what I'm going to do for the borders. We'll find out, but maybe. I think I'm going to get the 80 blocks done, and then I will decide what I want to do for the borders. But I'm kind of liking the idea of the pinwheels. And if I do the pinwheels, I think I might do the gray around the outside with the bright colors so that the pinwheels kind of pop. I don't want the borders to be, because there's going to be really busy. The quilt's going to be really busy. So I want to kind of calm it down a little bit while having a design accent. So that's what I'm kind of thinking right now. Shelly Clark says, don't leave the yeast out though. Big fail. You're right. Sandra Cedar says, share your bread recipes, please. Bread Dad cinnamon raisin bread. Yep, that's the one that I've been using. And I'll put a link to that in the description box down below. Linny says, my family loves it when I make chili cheese bread rolls. Ooh, that sounds good. That sounds good. That sounds good. Becky Spencer says, super cute elephant blocks. Your daughter will love it. Gosh, I hope so. Sandra Cedar says, hello, Becca. I've been binging lots of tutorials from all of your super friends. I love Tiffany and everyone. Awesome. Holly Savage says, hey, all. I've been watching the police chase and Bad Karen's videos. When the last one finished, this live popped up. Yay! I love that fabric and block. Hello, Holly. Louise says, I love that Bargello behind you. Awesome. I showed you exactly how to make this in Friday night's live stream. So if you want to conquer your fear of a Bargello, go back and watch that video. I showed you everything from picking and starching the fabric to cutting it and putting it together. Now, I am going to tell you with this Bargello, you'll get the tip for this one. When I started putting this together, you're going to see, and it looks so much better on camera than it does in person because that's where the design starts to hit you. You'll see when I came up to the middle, remember the pattern that I linked to in that video is a blog post. You can totally find that. But I wanted to make the bell, the gradient, a little bit more drastic. And so this middle piece, that really fine piece right here, that was cut at 3/4 of an inch. And so when I took a 1/4 inch off either side, it left it finished at just a 1/4 of an inch, which gave it that super sharp point. Then the other thing that I started thinking about is in a Bargello, what makes you feel like it's up and far away is when it's small, and when it's close and towards you, it's wider and it's bigger. And so I started thinking about that. And for these pieces here, you can tell they're a little bit more rectangular because they're wider than they are tall. And so every single strip in here is only a 1/4 of an inch difference. So this was cut, I think, at like 2 inches. This is 1 3/4. This is 1 1/2, 1 1/4, 1 3/4. And then I started repeating it. So I went back up to 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, 2, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, and 3 inches. So, yeah. I found a blog post where I basically took that as a starting point and figured out my own tweaks to it. So really good video if you're interested in doing a small Bargello quilt that you could turn into a pillow cover. You don't have to tackle the whole quilt. In fact, I would tell you not to. If there's a technique that you have been dying to try and you just want to see if you can do it, don't commit to the king size quilt. In fact, don't even commit to the throw. Just make a pillow cover. See if you can do that. And then if you still like it, you can always do the bigger version of the project. In fact, if you liked it and you loved it and you did well at it, you may find that you want to make more of those. And at that point, you can do the bigger quilt. But this way you can use some scraps just to test it out and see if it works for you. Also, wouldn't it be really cool? And I'm just thinking out loud, if I made Bargello blocks and put those into a quilt, that would be fun. Sandra just answered your question. It's Friday night's live stream. Math Geek says, that would be me too, Louise, which Louise says, I gave up on using the bread machine because I was eating too much of it. Yeah. Yep. Math Geek says, new channel, Becca Bakes Bread. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But I do have an idea in mind for a new channel that may be coming in the next couple months. You'll have to stay tuned for that. Anna said, I made 12 star breads one winter for my office, and it only took 6 hours. Nice. I mean, if you get the dough made ahead of time and you have the oven just heated up and going, you can just keep cycling it in and out, right? Because you could have multiple batches rising all at the same time, and you could bake multiple batches all at the same time. So, all right, I told you I was going to be live for about an hour. It's about an hour. I made a block. I showed you how I did it. I showed you how the blocks are all going to come together, and I even gave you some tips and tricks for the Bargello. So in the description box down below, if you're watching the replay, give me a little bit of time for this video to process, but there should be links to the video from Friday night if you want to make that Bargello. There will also be a link to that Bread Dad recipe that I mentioned, and I will have the cutting instructions per block, and then you can figure out the math to make as many blocks as you need. Thank you, friends, for hanging out with me on this Tuesday night, and I'll see you guys all on Friday night, where I might be continuing the Elephants on Parade. We'll see. See you guys then. Bye.